and thanks for all the help getting this set up. Sorry for the inconvenience. So, techniques and tools for becoming an intelligence operator. Just to clarify the title, this is not how to get into the military and do this, or into any particular agency. This is really just a focus on, over the last year, what Trace Labs has done and learned from all the different people doing intelligence for the organization, and then how you can apply it and use the techniques yourself. So a little outline of what I'll be going over today or in this hour. I always like to know when I go into a talk, what am I going to get out of this? What's it going to look like for the next little bit? This is what it is. I'm not going to go through every bullet point there, but that's what you got to look forward to. A little bit about myself. So I've been working in IT for about 20 years. Most of that's been security. I actually know what this is, and I have a whole box of them in my garage somewhere. And I remember those days. I started off with like a 14.4 modem. Yeah, so someone else remembers those days. So it's been really interesting in the journey to see how much we've done in the world of security since then, right? We went from basically none to a lot and very sophisticated at this point, right? So it's been really interesting to watch that progress. So that's my day job. I also am a volunteer in Coquitlam Search and Rescue. Been doing that for about 10 years. I focus on tracking and a few other disciplines in that area, and the reason why that's relevant is because we're going to talk about open source intelligence and intelligence gathering, and as a tracker, it's really similar, so I'll be drawing those similarities as we progress through this presentation. I'm also the founder of Trace Labs, so I'll talk about that a little bit. A lot of the material from in this presentation is from what a lot of our members have done over the last year. And if you'd like to contact me, that's my Twitter and my email address. So the standard disclaimer, I'm very opinionated. I say a lot of things, and they're all just my opinions. They don't reflect any company or affiliation that I've have now, or will have in the future. All right, so what's Trace Labs? Trace Labs was an idea I had over a year ago. I have a lot of dumb ideas. This one really seemed to take off. It's a nonprofit organization that's designed to help locate missing persons. Having spent 10 years in SAR, we search for a lot of missing persons, but a lot of people we don't look for. The assumption by the law enforcement is that those people are going to come home. Statistically speaking, most people do. I was really looking at the ones that don't, and that's what this is designed to help. So we provide a modern, cost-effective, and transparent solution to what I see as a growing problem. We focus on crowdsourcing open source intelligence through large organized events. So what we typically do is a OSINT CTF at a conference. That was really our bread and butter over the last year. We're now branching off to do these sort of events in schools. So last month we were at South Wales University in England where we did an event. And we typically look for 8 real missing people within that locale, so within that community. If we can't find them in the community, we just keep broadening that radius from city to state or province to country until we locate those 8 missing people. And so those are real missing people. It's not theoretical. So what we offer is a non-theoretical type CTF, which is really attractive for a lot of people. And so these are real people, real world people, and we have to be very careful how we proceed with that. We do a lot of different events. We used to do one event a month. Now it's multiple events per month. We're doing 2 events in the same day coming up pretty soon. We've done a lot of B-Sides, DEF CON, Sec Talks in Australia, both on-site and virtual. We've got a bunch of big events coming up with Layer 8 in the US, B-Sides Vegas, and we're just going to announce next week a couple of really big events that we're doing that just haven't come out yet. So stand by for that. So it's growing. The model came from an idea, and it's taken off. And this whole crowdsourcing open source intelligence has really caught on. And we're going to talk about how to apply that in other industries as well. So a couple questions I often get asked, around, who are you looking for? And I break it down into 3 main categories. People that are hiding, that don't want to be found. Those are typically people that want to start their life new. And you could say, well, Rob, why are you looking for those people? Why are you bugging them? Well, usually it's because they want to get away from some obligations, so the police want to talk to them. That could be child support and things like that. There are also people that are being hidden, so that's human trafficking. And then people that don't even know they're missing, so that's child abductions. So those are sort of the 3 main areas we focus on. We don't just look for anybody. Law enforcement actually has to post on the internet something to the effect of, we're seeking the public's support to find this person. That's really our calling card and our invitation to go look for that person. Our scope is really limited, and that's by design. We don't want to interfere with any criminal investigations, so we do passive reconnaissance, no interaction, no friending, no liking, no commenting, no swiping right. We don't follow up with anybody. We don't want to interfere at all. All we do is collect intelligence, package it up really nice, and then give that to law enforcement, and then we move on to the next event. A lot of people ask us, well, how many people have you found? Well, we do locate people, but we don't really track that because we don't get involved. We just give the intelligence, and then we walk away and go to the next event. So now I'm going to get into actual stuff, techniques. The first thing I want to do is talk about your OpSec, and when you're doing this sort of work, that's the first thing I like to talk about, because for us and for other people in this industry, we're looking quite often at bad people, and bad people probably don't get as excited as you do about what you're doing, especially if you're using that information to provide to law enforcement. So if you're getting into this, you kind of want to be very aware of that. Are these people going to find out that you're doing this and then come burn your house down, right? I mean, that's bad. So I've heard a lot of stories where this has actually gone in a bad way. So it's really important to think about that. As you prepare to do your intelligence gathering, these are a list of basic questions that you should ask. I think there's a bunch more that you probably want to go through, but think about, why am I doing this in the first place? Did my friend down the road ask me to check out somebody they're thinking about renting their apartment to? Or is this a formal engagement where they're expecting a written report that's going to be organized very nicely that I'm getting paid for? So, really need to get the scope of what you're doing. What's the worst that could happen? So I spoke about that a little bit, right? Want to be very careful how you proceed. How are you preserving your intel? So there's a lot of great tools out there that I would highly recommend. Hunchly is one of them. Right? Are you going to go to court with this information? Are the police going to ask you for it? How are you preserving that information? How are you categorizing it? What sort of data points are you looking for? All of that's important. How will your report be consumed? So if you have a 100-page report and no executive summary, I don't think people are going to read it. So that's really important to think about. You can have the greatest intelligence, but if it's not consumable, how great really is it? What are your objectives, right? What do you want to get out of your operation? And then that follows into, what does done look like? So a lot of people will spin their wheels and they'll collect a ton of information, which is fine, I guess, if you've got lots of time, but we're really looking at what are you trying to achieve here? And then, how long do you have? Do you have a month, a week, a day? And that's really going to define what you're going to be able to produce. And then who are you going to share it with? What's that look like? Is it going to go on a USB drive? Can you email it? So some of the questions you need to ask before you start. Technical setup. So this is just the basics. Everybody will have a different view on this, but these are some of the things that I would initially look at. I prefer a VM that I can archive after each operation. I use VirtualBox. It's free, easy to set up. If you've got a Mac, you might want to use Fusion or Parallels. Your platform, a lot of us use Kali Linux. That's what I would prefer. But a lot of people run Windows too. Set up your apps, right? Get Multigo, ReconNG all set up, get it installed and configured, get that as part of your snapshot so you can just reuse it every time. You don't have to worry about reconfiguring it each time. Get your admin apps, of course, set up right so you can do screenshots really easily. Hunchly, I'm a big fan of that. Get your plugins set up as well. So this is something people overlook a lot. And then get your account set up as well for your social media. I don't use a lot of fake accounts, but if you're going to use those, you want to set those up well in advance. You can do things with LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, I have it set so you can't see when I look at your profile. Of course, I can't see when you look at mine, but I don't care, so that's okay. And then, of course, you want to set up your VPN. So if you're doing reconnaissance with more of a risky area, VPN definitely recommended. So this is kind of your base. Once you've got it set up, it's reusable. So it's a little bit of work up front, but down the road, it's really going to save you a lot of headaches. So then you start to get into target acquisition, and this is really going to depend on what type of target you have. But some of these you can apply across the board. So one of the things you want to start thinking about right away is unique identifiers. How am I going to identify this target? In SAR, we call them subjects. So as a tracker, what I would be looking at is stuff about their feet. So what kind of shoe size do they have? What's their tread look like? For you, you probably want to look at, maybe name, phone number, email address, anything like that that's going to allow me to identify that person, company, or whatever that target is. Surprisingly enough, most of the information I get is usually not spelled correctly. So if you don't check that, you start off down the road, and it's like, yeah, that's actually not the person because the I was supposed to be an E. Very irritating. Friends or family, so if I can get a little information on that, that's going to get me started a little bit faster. Special circumstance or situation. So why am I looking for this person? Usually, I say person because usually for us in Trace Labs it is a person, but it could be a company. So what's triggered this investigation? Is it an insurance fraud? Is it a criminal activity investigation? Like, why am I doing this? The details around that is going to help you. Stationary or mobile, so is this person on the move a lot, or do they just kind of reside in that town? That's going to help me select what tools I want to use. And of course, lifestyle. So, if they're doing drugs, or if they're a criminal, or even clubs, anything like that's going to help me as well. That's going to narrow my scope. Geography and mobility. So, do they reside in a certain area, or highly mobile as well? That's going to change things. Description. Anything like that. The part that stands out here are scars, tattoos, piercing. Those are really helpful because when I'm doing image analysis or facial rec or something like that, a lot of times you'll get the person with the same name, the picture looks really similar, so it's like, yeah, that's the guy or that's the girl, and it's not. So if I can pick out something very unique, like a piercing or anything like that, that's going to help a lot. Sophistication level, that's something I always want to be aware of. Are they going to know you're looking for them? And if so, what's that going to look like? Are they aware of the situation? What's your risk level? So are they going to set up things to be able to alert them that you're looking? Are they going to be able to hide very easily? That sort of stuff. So those are sort of the things I work through. We see our members work through that sort of stuff. Usually there are members that come into Trace Labs. They're typically, some of them are very new to OSINT and intelligence gathering, so they get stuck fairly quickly. These are some of the things I talk to them about to keep them going. Instead of looking at your target, look at things that are peripheral around your target. In tracking, we do that too. We don't look for the subject, we look for what we call sign. So friends and family are perfect. For missing people, we get a lot of chatter around the activity. So that's great. So you'll look for those social butterflies that are producing the most amount of content, and that'll usually take us down a path. Abandoned accounts are really good to look at, not because they're their accounts, but I look for the patterns, things like usernames, what kind of platforms they prefer as far as social media, that sort of stuff. Criminal records, I don't know if those are publicly available here. In Canada, I can find your criminal record, and I really like those because it'll show me not only what kind of crimes you've committed, but also your aliases that you like to use. And those are usually linked to social media accounts, and that makes my job so much easier to find those. School records and photos, so if I can find a photo of you anywhere, that's going to be a bonus. I can use a bunch of apps to help me find you that way. Past employees, employers. Usually on employee websites, or employer websites rather, sometimes there's pictures and profiles of people. That's golden. Sports teams, either you're playing or maybe you're betting on them. Gym memberships, fantastic as well. Anywhere that you could leave a trace as far as on a forum. So Amazon accounts are very popular, Strava. So we all have these watches, a lot of us do anyway, right? That's uploading content to the internet. A lot of those were very open. Only recently they became a little more private. Any sort of video games, so if I detect you, especially if you're a younger person and you're playing video games, I can get on Steam or any other sort of forum where I see you might have posted. TripAdvisor, if you're a traveler and you like to review stuff, I'm going to look there as well. So those are some different areas you can look to pick up information. So I'll start with real names. Quite often that's what you're given, somebody's name, maybe a company name as well. It's the most common starting point. Again, make sure it's spelled correctly. Are they using the middle name in their usernames? Do they like to use that or the initial? Start off, just do some Google dorking. LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn. And it sounds ridiculously simple, but LinkedIn is so nice because it gives you nice structure, right? If you send me a LinkedIn request, I will accept no matter what because it just widens my scope of search. And especially for a company, you can go in there and you can find the structure, you can find who reports to who, how involved they are in the industry, and usually you can find out more social media accounts as well. So really like using that to start off with some of my searches. You want to begin building a profile once you get this initial information. Family, friends, employment, residence, those are kind of my go-to areas, and those will take you off into different areas depending on what you find. Ultimately, I want to work towards getting those kind of 4 main areas: real name, email addresses, usernames, and of course as many pictures as I can find as well. Depending on the occupation of the person, you're going to be able to go to certain sites. Most of us here are in security or IT. This is an example of a site I'd go to if I have your real name to see if you've registered any domains. Domain registration is great. It's actually more private now. They're starting to hide a lot of that information, but it used to reveal a ton of stuff, like your phone number, your email address, and stuff like that, which was fantastic. So LinkedIn, I just can't get enough of LinkedIn. It's just such a fantastic tool for this sort of work. They try to make you pay for the service to get more details. LinkedIn X-Ray is a great tool that you can use to get past that and get great searches. It really takes the limitations off of it. If you have their email address, you can just plug it into that URL there and get their profile right away, which makes things a little faster. So if you have their username, that's usually, you can usually guess that by first name dot last name. If that doesn't work, you try to get their email address, and that'll usually have their username in it, and they'll usually reuse that across platforms, just like password reuse. You'll see username reuse quite a bit. So we want to see if they've used their middle name or not. Is this a unique alias, or are they reusing that alias quite a bit? Is it already existing? Do they have a number in it? So quite often with a company, they'll add a number to the end of their username if there's already a person in that company that has that name. And is it consistent across their personal and their work? So if it is, that's much easier as well if you have their work email or username. So some of the sites that I like to use to check usernames, there's a couple of them here. You can plug it in, and these sites are pretty similar how they work. It'll show you if that username's used across those different social media accounts. And it does dozens and dozens of different social media platforms. So it's really nice and quick. Actually, a lot of these sites, you can click on it, and it'll actually show you not only if it's in use or not, but also give you information about that username. So for a really quick check, it's well worth it. I use all 3 because they're all slightly different. If that doesn't work, just manually check these top 4 social media platforms. I like YouTube. It's kind of the forgotten child quite often, but YouTube's given me some of the best results. And in our Trace Labs operations, I see a lot of people score really well with that as well. For email, so email is tricky. I like to make sure that it is actually owned by the target. Quite often we see people make mistakes with that where they just assume it is because it's the same name, but often it's not. So there's a lot of email verification services out there that you can use. These are the top 3 that I use that will actually validate if it's real to start off with. And then it'll also tell you quite often information about the user. So it might give you the person's name, even phone number, things like that, which is really handy. It moves you to the next level. The third from the bottom there will actually browse the entire domain. It won't give you every email in the domain, but it'll give you a bunch of them, which is nice because then you can correlate that with their friends and family or other people that might be in that company. Of course, Bing and Google, and that should be at the top of the list actually because I like to do that quite often. And just that, if you've got their email address, will usually score you some good information. Now this is my favorite part with email. I love to go to these breach data search engines because I just take their email, plug it in there, and it's going to tell me all these other platforms that they're using that have been breached. So just the fact that they're using those other platforms is really nice to know. If you were a bad guy, you could download that breach data, and then you probably have their password if they haven't changed it. I'm not recommending you do that, but bad guys could. And I use all of them because they're all slightly different. You'll see a lot of overlap again with those, but they're all slightly different. Gravatar service, so a lot of people used to use this, not so much anymore, but that usually will give you a little bit of information as well. And then if they've registered any sort of DNS stuff, which most of us in this room have, you can go to that URL and get their more information. Ashley Madison, so of course that's just like the breach data one. I was thinking about this earlier. Like if this is breach data and people's email addresses in there and you find it, I mean that's really bad, right? So there's high risk for these sort of things. All these sites are going to get breached sooner or later, right? So if it's something like Ashley Madison, there's huge potential there to get in a lot of trouble quickly, right? I mean, you could sign up all your friends for something like that because it's going to get breached later, right? Imagine those conversations with their spouse or partner later on, right? So really, really bad stuff. So I spelled LinkedIn wrong, I just noticed. That's supposed to be LinkedIn. So that's an example of, what you'll see for me. And some people will have even more. They'll have their websites, which I love, public websites, or their personal websites. That'll show you lots of great information. It's my favorite just to get the ball rolling to start with. These are really popular sites to use for people to get more information on an individual. Very popular in the US, very US-centric. You probably have versions of this here. I live in Canada, that's where I reside, so for me, if I'm looking up somebody in Canada, they don't work as good. They still do have some information. I usually blast through these when I'm looking for somebody. Pitbull usually gives me the best results. It takes 2 seconds to do, so I recommend trying these out if you want information on somebody. Quite often, it'll give me their home address, sometimes their phone number, maybe their cell phone number, and information about their family, which is then something I can use as well. So mileage will vary depending on what part of the country or world you're in. Snapchat. So I'm not a huge Snapchat advocate for OSINT. It's pretty cool because it does some neat things and there's some interesting tools out there. I'm a huge fan of GeoLocation for OSINT because usually an operation consists of a certain scope. You have a certain place, a certain time, a certain target. So there's a bunch of tools out there for this app. So if they're using Snapchat, there's a tool here to search by username. So if you got username, you can find them pretty quickly, which is nice. And then there's this map search content app here, which is cool. And you can't really see it, but there's these like blue dots or blue kind of circles on there. You can kind of, near the top right above where it says Coquitlam, there's one. So you can click on there and you can see what's going on. It's someone Snapchat in that location at a certain time. So that's nice if you're looking for location and time and they're using Snapchat. So then we get into geolocation. So I really like using these sort of tools. OpSec is very popular with the agencies in Canada. Most of the law enforcement teams use this. And it's good. I really like it. I tend to use ArcGIS. There's a free demo you can get. You can actually use the free demo of OpSec, although it's a little bit limited in its functionality. ArcGIS, you think you get the full version for 30 days. The reason that I really like this is because I basically start off, I map out on the map, like it's like a Google Maps interface, the location that I want to look at. Then I pick the social media channels that I want, Twitter, Facebook, all the usuals, right? And then the time frame that I'm looking for. So if you know the person's in that vicinity at that time, it's really nice. Or their friends, or if there's any sort of activity. ArcGIS is used for emergency management, so if there's an earthquake or some other big bad event, you can use it for that. So it works great for our purposes. It's just not built for our industry, so a lot of people don't know about it. So I also like to go back and use some of these tools because I find quite often people that want to erase their trace on the internet will do that, and the people that are really good at it will do it months in advance. So we've had several cases of people disappearing, and they deleted a lot of their accounts. But you can go back in time, of course, with some of these tools and kind of take a look at what it looked like before. It's really hard to erase yourself off the internet. So this seems really simple, but it's really effective as well. So just a few more notes on going back in time and looking at history of a place. I use this a lot. I'm a huge fan of Google Street View. Typically when I'm doing reconnaissance on a structure, I'll first look at Google Maps. I'll look at the perimeter. I'll look at the top of the building to see what they've got there. I'll look for loading docks, look for entry from the roof, look at what's on the roof, go through all of that. Street View is really cool as well. I use it all the time, and one of the things I like about it is the history that it keeps, right? So not only am I looking at this is a cigar shop in Paris, if anybody was wondering. And it's, it shows me what it looks like from the outside. There's parking, there's a single door on the front, stuff like that. And you can see the street view in the top left corner there, and it's showing me, well, there's other pictures I can look at from other time periods. So if I go back in time, now I can see this is more in the evening. There's no parking there. The bus stop is gone. Look at the garbage cans. So if I'm going to do a physical pen testing later, this is my reconnaissance mode. I'm taking a look at this. Oh, they've got the steel doors that close at night. Okay, so that's interesting. But for me, like, I like the garbage bins because then I can pose as the garbage person. I know the company name. I know that they're probably not shredding. It looks like they're just dumping stuff in there. So there's a bunch of things like that I'll look at. And this is really simple, but there's every company that I look at, there's always stuff like this that I'll pick out from going back in time like that. So if your target is mobile, this is actually getting to be more and more the case. Give you an example of this. It's ironic, but I flew here from Canada. I took, what's the German airline? Lufthansa, right. So I flew with them, and I was actually, somebody mentioned earlier, they saw my tweet. I was waiting in line, and I get frustrated really easily, and then, of course, I start tweeting. And so I tweeted something to them. I was like, oh, I'm waiting in line for like 5 minutes here, and I put a picture of the people in line. And then today I got an email, a great phishing attempt from them, apparently. So it was very timely. So someone obviously was monitoring that. Just brilliant, right? So that's an example of where people are monitoring my travel activity and then responding to that. So the bad guys were really smart in that case because I looked at it and I almost clicked it because it looked so good and it was just perfectly timed. But these are some of the things I would look at. Tripcase, very popular mobile app. Uber, a little bit harder to get information from these. But there's other ones that have more of kind of a forum-based environment, right? Airbnb, everybody leaves their reviews on there. If you've got their username, you could probably find some of their stuff there. Everybody's got travel points. That's another great area to take a look at. And then memberships, rental car stuff. These forums like Trip Planner, Booking.com, Expedia, Priceline, right? A lot of people are very active in those. I bet you most of this room has at least posted something once in one of these forums, right? So that can tell me a little bit about your travel habits, where you like to travel, all that sort of stuff. Then get into physical infrastructure a little bit. So usually I kind of start there. Even if it's a person I'm looking for, I want to look at where they reside and where they work. And I want to look at some of these things. If I'm doing reconnaissance on a company, of course, this is even more important. I love finding the YouTube videos of the tour of the office because that basically gives me everything I need to know all at once. I just go frame by frame. I look at their Wi-Fi. I look at their CCTV. I look at their door access. I look at all those things. It's great. Commercial property information, so are they leasing? And if so, that's going to usually give me the whole floor plan, which is really handy, especially if you're going to do physical pen testing and try to walk right in the door. Street view, so I talked about that. Huge fan of that. And then there's all this other stuff as well, right? So all the associated records that they're going to have with City Hall, legal records, fire up Shodan, see what their IoT looks like. Lots of opportunities there. I also like to get into their parking, their security, food delivery. There's lots of opportunities there as well. So tons of stuff. I could talk for probably an hour just on that. Technical infrastructure. So this is probably, most of you are already pretty familiar with a lot of these sites and tools. Some of the ones that I really like is Hurricane Electric. There's a lot more out there now, but that's been my go-to site for ages. Some of this is a little bit more private now as far as domain registration and stuff like that, but there's still tons of information out there. People really don't think about this and they forget about it and it sits there for years. So it's usually I can find your name, your email address, your phone number, and that's great. Sometimes it's a DL, so I can get that as well. Wiggle.net is one of my favorites. It's actually really accurate as well. So for your Wi-Fi, SSID, I can usually get that for any particular company. That's always nice to have. On the corporate side, so now you get more into, I find, the culture and engagement with a company. So I like to go through the reviews for a company. Pastebin, I'll set up an alert. Google Alerts, I'll set that up as well. LinkedIn again. Then I'll go through, corporate membership, taxes, affiliations of any kind, what the company's doing online, all that sort of stuff. For individuals within a company, these are kind of the prioritized list of sites that I use, and as well as a lot of the Trace Labs members go through this, right? So Facebook, Really gives you a good overview of their friends and who those are, who they're most active, Instagram, daily habits, right? SlideShare is surprisingly good for reference letters, which is really nice to have because then you have a senior person in the company and you have all their contact information. Criminal records, that's a gold mine if you can find it, and I love personal websites as well, so I usually get a ton of information from that as well. So I'm going to go through a couple examples of what TraceLabs has done. These are 3 people that I thought you would find interesting, and the OSINT that was done with those people, right? So the first one was a girl reported missing in Victoria, British Columbia. Not really a big social media person, so that was more difficult for people, but they eventually found her. She posted something on a forum about her cat or cat food or something like that. Used that to get her username and just guessed her email from the username. Found another post about her travel plans, and she was asking for room and board in order to travel the island. And then found out that she was traveling with 2 people, which was interesting. And so use that information then to find that, she had a boyfriend, and found her boyfriend's social media, and found out that he had a criminal record and with a history of violence. So this is all of a sudden getting kind of bad, right? Found 6 aliases for her boyfriend, and a bunch of abandoned social media accounts, drug and criminal activity with her boyfriend. So right away, people are thinking human trafficking maybe. And then immediately after that, we found out that she was actually located. So that's a really good story, but it kind of shows you how the contestants kind of navigated through this, linking the bits of information together. The next one, a young girl. So this was a bit of a sad story. Teenager, partying a lot, no solid residence, so she wasn't staying at home at all. Never knew where she was. Her friends never knew where she was. Out partying a lot, doing more and more drugs, it looks like. And so our members found a lot of this information, how her lifestyle was just escalating, associating more and more with criminals, and eventually went to a party at a grow-op. Do people know what grow-ops are here? Are you familiar with that term? In North America, it's where you have like a house or a field and you're growing drugs. So it's like a private criminal operation. So those are not a good place to hang out typically. And of course, that was the last party she went to, and then it was a body recovery after that. So from the information we collected, you could kind of tell where she was and where she traveled to, and then based off of that, we hope that the police can then correlate kind of the direction of travel and possible route that these people could have taken. So then third example was a person that went missing, and father and husband of a family just goes missing, and family doesn't know what happened. They're concerned, of course. His image shows up on a social media site, and I can't remember if it was the same image or just one that that got picked up from social recognition. And those are getting surprisingly good now, so it doesn't have to be the same picture. And figured out that it was the same guy. We got some unique identifiers there that identified, okay, that's the guy. So he basically just ran away, and this was one where he was trying to avoid child support, and so we gave that over to law enforcement. And so he went from Toronto to Montreal, I believe. So that was a really interesting one for us. Target evasion, so we see this a little bit. Most people are not very good at this. We've seen a few that have been really good. Depending on how sophisticated they are and how much time and effort they put into it. We had one where it was a child abduction. There was a couple that were divorced, and the husband came and took the child and disappeared. So tons of social media activity, and then none, and then zero visibility. So we believe they left the country. He had contacts in other parts of the world. But in that case, there was nothing. Nobody found anything. So it's rare, but we do see some of that. Some of the tactics we see is they just abandon their accounts and they don't do anything else, which we saw in this case, fake data. So I think there's definitely a service opportunity out there for fake data generation. But that takes a lot of work, and it's not foolproof either. Removal of accounts, it doesn't really work that well. Like, you can delete your Facebook account, but it's not that great. Aliases, of course. And then try not to live on the internet, right? Trying to go unplugged. Extremely difficult for most people. Most people will plug in at some point to get an update and stuff like that. It's just a matter of time. The thing that really I find super interesting, and if any of you have seen this, I'd be really interested in talking to you about it, is honeypots for like a perimeter alert. Basically, bad guys figuring out when you're looking for them. And I think that as people get more sophisticated, we may see more of that. So now I'm almost done. Just want to get into this a little bit. And again, I'd really be curious to hear your thoughts on it. Trace Labs has been really successful, and it kind of proved the model works, this crowdsourced open source intelligence. It's cost effective, it's scalable, and it produces results. So it's very new for law enforcement, so they look at this and they're kind of like confused on how to work with us. It's been very positive so far, so the worst cases, they just ignore us. Best cases, they're like, hey, yeah, this is cool. And they actually come in and participate in our CTF sometimes, which is great. And so we're seeing more and more of that, but going to the next level, now we can apply the same model to a bunch of other things, right? So, you know, we can do this trend analysis of the last few years on where we're going to kind of figure out, you know, what's going to be next. And we continue to give up privacy for convenience, of course. I mean, we're all doing that more and more. So where I really see this going, and I have acquaintances that are working on this, is really intelligence on anyone at any time, for anyone, really, right? So you don't have to spend a lot of money to learn everything you need to know about anybody. So if you have a job interview, you want to learn about who's interviewing you, you want to learn about who you're interviewing, anything, right? And I don't see that as being expensive to get when we crowdsource it, right? So, you know, this is going to get into an area where we're very quickly able to just, and with the click of a button, get a very nice report out, right? So, you know, convenient, right? Quite often you're going to want that information, but how do you feel about being a target of that information, right? So I think this is going to be a very new thing for people, and with a little bit of controversy. So I'm very curious what you think about that. So I'd appreciate any feedback. If you're looking for resources, these are some of the resources that I recommend. Of course, if you're interested in Trace Labs, that's the URL right there. We're always looking for feedback and people to help us out. We have ongoing operations, so if you want real-world OSINT experience, we provide that. If you want to have a CTF environment, we provide that as well. We're doing multiple every month. If you want us to work with you to do one, we're more than happy to do that as well. And those are some other resources as well for books, podcasts, articles, and things like that. All right. Thank you very much. Sorry for being late. Sorry for the technical issues.